Robert asked me to talk about the farm when he was out visiting one time. And so since it is the primary motivation for my setting up, the farm was to focus on high-density foods, producing high-density foods, and also because I liked farm life. As a child, I used to do farming on our family farm in Tennessee, Signal Mountain, and on that farm we still had horses, and we learned to plow behind horses and pitch hay and all of that just during the summertime. So I had the best of the time in my youth as a farmer. But in the intervening years, farming has changed an awful lot. Though I've been around farms quite a bit in my field work, especially in Guatemala and Chiapas, where the Indians that I was studying were planting corn with a digging stick, where you have a big tall stick and you put a hole in the ground and drop in a few seeds of corn and some beans, and then you go on to the next place and put another hole in the ground. And before you do that, you have to do slash and burn. You have to cut all the forest, such as it is at the time, grown probably 4 or 5 years of growth, and then you cut it down and you burn it. I've had varied agricultural experience, but all as an onlooker or as an anthropologist, and this is the first time it was up to me. We bought this land. I bought it, and then we had several managers who really didn't quite have the idea of sustainability, and so I finally settled on a young fellow, John Gorman, who had not done much farming at all himself, but he was a quick learner, and so we've been doing a lot together. I don't have the slides that I was going to show you today. The first slide showed an old, battered-up window in a barn, which was to illustrate just how run down the farm was when I first bought it. It hadn't been attended for maybe 7 or 8 years. It used to be a dairy. I think they must have had trouble with the dairy because they sold off some of the land before I got to it. And it looked as though someone had tried to do a goat dairy there, judging from the size of the stanchions and the milking parlor. But when I got it, it was just a pretty wild place. I once counted about 30 deer in one of the pastures. I've seen a mountain lion from a distance, not on our land, but further over. And we've had bobcats and all kinds of wildlife. And we had 300 swallows, 300 cliff swallows who were nesting under the eaves of one of the broken down houses that we had to tear down in order to get permission to build a new house. And in addition to the 300 cliff swallows, we had around 50 barn swallows, plus all the other wildlife. So we called it Swallow Valley because as you look, you can see up this small creek that runs up the valley. There are other problems with the land during heavy rains. The best land for growing anything gets inundated with water, and there's a very thin soil level, and underneath that is almost clay-like soil, and the water doesn't soak down into the clay, it just runs off. So there are problems there we had to deal with. Maybe that was why the land was still for sale when I got it. But the first thing I had to figure out was what to do first. And clearly, since most of the land was high mountain slopes or high hill slopes, we couldn't do much planting on those unless we wanted to do olives. Now, I was thinking about planting olive trees. It takes about 5 years before you begin to get a harvest. And as I learned more about it, I got more excited and at the same time more discouraged. Well, first of all, I guess I was introduced to the Bradley family, the family that does the importing of olives and olive oil from all over the world, but they choose the place where the best, the highest polyphenol counts are available, and they've been shipping up from Chile, for example, one of the best places, but also they had found local places with high polyphenol counts, and and all the other goodies in olive oil. So I thought that was one of the ways I wanted to go. I could combine pasturage and have animals, and then with the olive trees. But the more I found out about it, the more I realized how intensive really a good job would be needed, and very expensive. You have to get the olives to be crushed almost in the same day, basically. The minute the olives are picked, they start deteriorating. And so you want to get it, all of the olives that you're picking, you want to get right away to be crushed. And that means you have to have a big crew picking all at the same time, which is a big expense. And there are lots of other reasons why I realized that, you know, if we're going to do anything, it's almost better just to buy it from the Bradley family, or their retail store, which is in Berkeley, just recently opened up, called the Amphora. But I learned a lot from them, and in this store, I attended an olive tasting session, which was great. I'll never forget it. It was just like a wine tasting session, and they would test us and see if we could tell what it was or how we would describe the flavor and what was the under flavor. And so like one of the ones we tasted was the Manzanillo that we had on the table. And so it was really an exciting, heady experience. The family was a marvelous family. And I know why Michael is so enthusiastic about them. They were really very friendly. They really appreciated people who knew as much about olives as Michael did. And that was really my entree when I came from Michael to work with them. And they actually wanted me to open up a store to sell their olive oil, but I just was in no position to do that. And I was thinking of possibly selling their olive oil in our farmers markets. But that really runs against the whole idea of buying local. And I thought, well, maybe some farmers markets are a little different from others. The great advantage is you usually are buying direct from the farmer when you go to these markets. And this is very important if you're going to do well financially with a small farm. You can't sell wholesale. You get killed unless you can really do everything directly with the customers. So anyway, so that was out. And the next thing I thought about, well, we need sheep anyway to benefit the pasture. The main reason I chose the sheep was to increase the depth of the soil, bring in mycorrhizal, which we haven't done yet. We want to bring in the mushroom filaments that travel underneath the soil and spread out. When you see a mushroom, it's just a fruit. And I'm actually going up to Washington State to learn from Paul Stamets how to grow mushrooms. But mushrooms will be a definite plus. One of the things I read recently about mushrooms, like the shiitake and maitake, is that one example was quoted as having spermidine, which is a new possible longevity substance that I don't know much about except just an article or two that I read. But anyway, it's shiitake and maitake have had a long history in Japan, a long history of being very healthy, and it's well known in the society. Anyway, so we settled with the sheep because they can be up high on the hills, and we chose what are called meat sheep, Katahdins, named after Mountain Katahdin in Maine. I don't know why, but they came in through that part of the country. And these are sometimes called hair sheep because you don't have to shear them. The wool just comes off and sloughs off in the pasture. And they're very good meat. They have lanolin, less lanolin than the other sheep do, and this has an effect on how they taste. So we have begun selling sheep meat. I usually have called it mutton, but actually in Sonoma County everything is lamb. You call it lamb. So basically what we have most of on the farm are the sheep. The next thing we want to do is switch over to a sheep dairy. The point is we're only making about $5,000 a month selling our sheep meat, and we also were selling strawberries. And to make ends meet, we have to do about 3 times that much. And it's going to take another year or 2 before we'll be getting up there if we can. So the next thing we decided to do, well, we need added on value to what we're doing. And obviously making cheese was one thing to do. So I went over to Colorado. It was very hard to find milk sheep because they're all the rage now. Everybody's trying to buy up milk sheep. The most common breed is East Frisian. And I had to go all the way to high in the mountains of Colorado before I could get some East Frisian ewes and rams to start our herd. But now we're beginning to develop a flock of milk sheep with the intention of making Manchego cheese and other varieties. And this, of course, earlier when I was trying to keep my protein down to below, 40 grams a day or below, and sometimes up to 45, I was not really enthusiastic about having a lot of meat on the farm. Other things, we're also selling poultry. We have, and I have pictures of all this. I'm sorry I can't show it all to you. I don't have it all on the website. And I've forgotten what the order of it is. Maybe we can go to the next website picture to see what's there. I can go. You can get it? Just go around. Any picture will do, and I'll talk about it. Oh, yeah, those are the chickens. Okay, fine. Maybe you can bring it up a little bit further, and we can get these lower pictures. Yeah. Okay, so we have pastured chickens, and there's a difference between pastured chickens and free-range chickens. And free-range chickens are better than what you usually get in the grocery store, which are chickens that have been raised in very small, confined cages, and they're under stress, and who knows how much cortisol might be in their meat or their eggs or whatever from all the stress. In fact, I just recently heard that they actually remove the bills from those chickens so that they won't peck each other through the cages. It's terrible. So people usually like to buy free range, but that just means that they're out in the barnyard, and it doesn't mean a lot. It just means that they're not confined. But we are above that. We have pastured chickens, which means that they're eating caterpillars and grasshoppers, and they're getting other sources of protein. They follow the sheep. We do mob grazing with the sheep. We bring them all into a small paddock, and they eat everything down. And then we move them over to another paddock and let that paddock grow up, so that as it grows up higher, the roots grow down lower. The roots grow about as low down as the grass grows high. And we want to get the roots down further and further to increase the depth of the topsoil. So we also have, those are some mixture of ducks and geese in a temporary enclosure. We now have a better situation. And by the pond, I had the pond built especially because of the vegetables that I want to grow that we still haven't started growing yet. But the pond was filled up last year in just 2 rains. I mean, the rains just sweep across those hills and filled it up, actually too soon before we were going to do some things. Like one of the things we wanted to do was to put in some coils low down in the pond. The pond is about 18 feet when it's full. And those coils will act as a geothermal heating system for the new house that's being built. And I have pictures of the house there. I don't have the recent pictures I wanted to show you. But so maybe we can go to the next slide, see what's there. Oh, there are more sheep. All right. Let's go up to the top again, Tim, and see where we can try going to. Go to Farmers Market under Community. See what we have there. Oh, we don't have any picture there. Forgot about that. Well, then try going to Longevity, Nutrition, and Science. And go to scientific meetings. This will be appropriate. There we are. And this was when we were... Was that when we were in San Antonio, or was that just in Atlanta? I've forgotten where.
Could be anywhere.
Yeah, anyway. So, and I talk about calorie restriction and what we want to do. We want to improve nutrition and so on. And let's see, go to another one here. How about go over to community, see what's there. Now go to longevity. Try that one. Let's see. I've forgotten the order of these things. Go to anthropology. Okay, this is all right. This is where you can download my two most recent theoretical papers. One is the theoretical paper, and the other is a test of the theory. And some of you may have heard me talk about well-being and adaptive potential at one of the other meetings. Basically, I have a measure of well-being, a measure of adaptive potential, which correlates inversely with various other measures, chief among them being the maladjusted defense mechanisms. The use of maladjusted defense mechanisms correlates inversely with high adaptive potential, as you might expect. It's logical. Also, it correlates inversely with anxiety measures. So the higher in adaptive potential, the lower your anxiety. And so these are validated through various studies, and now I'm writing a third volume. Well, I've got 3 books in process. The first one basically was on cognitive anthropology, which is my main field. And in there I go into studies of narrative and the idea of narrative grammar, some things that I published in a couple of early papers in Science and also in The Anthropologist. And I was thinking of that this morning when Peter was talking about his artificial intelligence, because that was the time when I was excited about artificial intelligence, and I had people who were very adept at programming in languages of artificial intelligence, particularly Lisp and interlisp. And so we had various artificial approaches, automated narrative studies, and we had what we were learning about from Peter, those early studies where you had the kind of a fake interface with ELIZA and Parry and some of these other things. Well, we had a fake interface for our students who were taking a course in ethnography, and they were learning about the area that I had studied and how I would go into the field and do various things. And they would interview one of my chief informants, who was a diviner, a calendar priest, and he would. We had his entire entire autobiography, and the students would ask a question like, "Tell me when you were married," or something like that. And we had a little interface section and say, "Oh, you want to know about when I was married, do you?" And